Hola, mi nombre es Satsu Cinco, and this is my review over the Cold Steel Espada. Now before I get started on the stats, I want to talk about the knife itself. First of all, the name Espada. I believe this is Lynn Thompson referencing the size of the knife. This is a pretty massive knife when you get it in your hands. This particular one is 5.5 inches. They even make a 7.5 inch version. But the word Espada is Spanish for sword. So if you walk up to someone and say, I have an espada in my pocket, you're literally saying, I have a sword in my pocket. And this is a pocket sword. Again, it's 5.5 inch blade. That's the legal limit in my state, Texas. And it gives you plenty of reach. Now, that's pretty cool. You know, I think that's a pretty cool marketing ploy by Cold Steel. But what I find even more interesting is the true history behind this knife. This is a classic design, and I love classics. And this design is called a navaja. Navaja is Spanish for folding knife or pocket knife, depending on the translator you use. But it's basically a folding knife. And a navaja is also a style of knife, this style. And the navaja originated in Spain around the 15th century. And a wide-diverse group of people used them: sailors, merchants, gypsies. But they gained notoriety more by criminals. This was known as the knife of criminals. And if you were a thief, burglar, muggle, killer, this was your fighting knife of choice. And this was the fighting knife of Spain. And it was just associated with crime so much that it's really not that popular of a knife in Spain anymore. There's just a few companies that still make them. Joker is one of them, and you can find those knives on worldknives.com. But it's a pretty interesting knife. When you opened it, the back of the blade, or I guess you call this the tang, would have teeth. And as you open it, it would make a ratcheting sound like and it worked a lot like this Cold Steel Kudu, except this Kudu doesn't have teeth, it has bumps. And you can kind of see how it works right there. The same principle with the navaja. Some navajas had the pulling ring to close it, and others had what I can only describe as kind of a latch button. And when you open the knife, you'll go. And back in the day, if you heard that sound behind you, that was the equivalent of you walking around town at night and hearing a gun being cocked behind you. That was a really bad thing. That means it hit the fan and you were in a world of trouble. And your best option was probably to run. Your second best option was to fight back. You don't want the third option. But this was the fighting knife of criminals back in the day. And now it's serving a more justice role. This is now my self-defense knife. I carry it only for that reason. And I haven't done a lot of cutting with it because it is my self-defense knife. It's not like I'm going around on a daily basis cutting people up. That's not my job. But that is what I carry it for. Just to go over the stats real quickly, this knife has a 5.5 inch blade, and the overall length is 12 1/4 inches, and the blade thickness is 3.8 millimeters. And although this is a massive knife, it's fairly lightweight considering the size of the knife. It's 9.8 ounces. And, you know, me telling you it's 9.8 ounces, a lot of you, that's just a number, it doesn't mean anything to you. But when you see this knife, you're going to be like, wow, that's a huge knife. But once you hold it in your hands, you get to appreciate how light it actually is. And it's really fast in the hand. And it's not going to pull your pants down. I've carried it for several weeks now, and I haven't had any real issues carrying it. The knife, it's noticeable. You know you're carrying it, especially when you sit down, but it's not uncomfortable. Now, it has a few drawbacks. Every knife has its pros and cons, and this one's no different. This has a very low carrying pocket clip, and when you first get this knife, the pocket clip is very tight against the polished G10, and it's like tight to the point you can barely get paper in between though. And so when you put it in your pocket and you go to draw it and wave it, you just sit there tugging on your pants with it. It snags and you're just sitting there pulling and it's not coming out. So what I did to fix this is I went back to the house. I was at the fireworks stand at the time. I took the pocket clip off, put it in a vise, and I bent it just a little bit. And now I have a little bit more clearance between the pocket clip and the handle itself. And it's not loose in the pocket. It's not going to accidentally fall out. But I just gave me a little bit more room that I can more easily slide it into my pocket and then draw it out. This is kind of a pro and a con at the same time. If you're a collector, it's a pro. If you plan on carrying it, it's kind of a con. Again, having to do with drawing the knife and deploying it. You have a low carrying pocket clip, and if you have it bent, it's a very tight pocket clip, and you have this polished G10. And again, if you're a collector, that polished G10 is pretty snazzy. But if you want to draw the knife, especially in a self-defense situation, fairly quickly, you don't have a whole lot to hang on to. Your finger will slide back and forth on that thing all day. So when you're pulling it from your pocket, you don't have a lot for your thumb to grab onto on this side, and this carries, about this high right here, and you don't have a lot of pocket clip to grab onto. So it takes a little bit of practice and modification to open this knife on a reasonable speed and wave it. Like I said, I had to bend the pocket clip, and that worked out well for me. This knife is made out of polished G10. Well, the handle has polished G10 scales. The knife handle is milled out 7075 aluminum, and they say it rivals titanium in strength. The only thing I could see wrong with this is they didn't skeletonize the aluminum handles. I think they could have shaved a couple ounces maybe if they skeletonized it, but it's still a pretty lightweight knife. Now, this one does come with a mirror polish, both on the blade and on the boastles, and I just think this is a beautiful blade. If you didn't scare the crap out of people when you pulled this knife out, this would be a good dress knife. Again, you can open boxes with it. You can prepare food and cut meat with it and cut vegetables with it. You can cut string with it. You can use it as a utility knife, but you're going to turn heads when you open it because it's so huge. So you're going to draw a lot of unwanted attention to yourself. But like I said, if you didn't scare people half to death with this knife, this would be a pretty dressy knife. Now, I mentioned that the polished G10 is kind of a pro and a con and everything. What is Cold Steel doing to fix this? Well, Cold Steel is now coming out with a all G10 handle of the Espada, and it's going to be a textural G10 so you can actually grab it, and the blade itself is going to be a satin blade. Now, I really don't care for satin polished blades because they tend to rust, and because the pores in the steel are open. Mirror polished, you tighten those pores up and it's less inclined to rust, and it's pretty humid where I live, so rust is an issue where I live. But it's a great choice if you want an Espada and you don't want to spend what this probably cost out on the street $180, I believe, is what I paid for it. And the new G10 handle ones are going to be a lot more affordable, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on a dressy looking knife. If you want it for self-defense, you can get one with G10 handles, and they say it's about as strong as its aluminum counterpart. But I believe this is a pretty good self-defense knife. It has several key features. Once you solve the snagging problem with the pocket clip, it has a wave feature, so you can wave it open. And even though it has no jimping on it whatsoever, and it has smooth, polished G10, when you grab the knife, it is locked in there. The Augers on this knife are perfect for what it is, and it has this deep finger choil. Once you put that right there, I like to use the Filipino grip. The knife isn't going anywhere. Your hand's not going to slip forward or backwards. And if you want to, you can even choke downhill and grab it in the Filipino grip, and you're not really touching the lock that much. As long as you kind of maybe keep your thumb up a little bit like that, you can reach out and cut. And if you really have to reach out and cut, I don't recommend this for self-defense. You can grab it by the sub hilt right here and really reach out there. Maybe you have to cut a string that's kind of out of your reach, but you can reach out there and cut by grabbing it downhill. But again, the most comfortable grip for me is right here with the finger choil. Filipino grip. If you had to sharpen a pencil, you can with this, but like I said, you're going to turn heads and draw unwanted attention to you. And this is just a beautiful knife. I really enjoy it. This is probably my favorite cold steel knife as of right now. I guess my second favorite cold steel knife that I own would be the Lealdo Bowie. But yes, this is a force to be reckoned with, and I recommend anybody who needs a self-defense knife and has the money for a knife as nice as this to get one. I believe it's a good knife. It does have a few quirks about it, but it was fairly easy to fix, and with practice I can draw this pretty easily. But for those of you who can't afford this, Cold Steel is coming out with a G10 handled version that's going to be textured, and I believe it'll be a better self-defense knife than this, but this one will look better. I'm Satsu 5, and adios.